This incident occurred when I was approximately 15 years old, around the year 2008. My guardians had gone out for the evening to a gaming establishment, leaving me and our canine companion Luna by ourselves at home. It was about 11 p.m. and I was occupied with online messaging and watching videos on a popular streaming site. As I was engrossed in my typing and conversations, I heard Luna yapping at something in the main living area. My initial thought was that my guardians had returned, so I simply waited. After about a minute of continuous barking without any sound of the entrance opening, I got up and walked into the living area to investigate. Luna was facing the large windows that overlooked our driveway, still vocalizing. I couldn't really discern anything outside because the exterior lights were off and it was exceptionally dark. I peered through the window and observed only one vehicle in our driveway, confirming my guardians hadn't yet arrived. I attributed Luna's behavior to perhaps hearing a neighbor's car door closing loudly, or a particularly boisterous vehicle passing by, as we resided on a major thoroughfare with frequent noise, even late at night. I returned to my online conversations, but over the next 5 minutes, I repeatedly felt as though I was hearing sounds emanating from various parts of our residence. Luna would cease barking and then resume at irregular intervals. I was just about to get up to reassure her when I could have sworn I detected a tap or a rustling sound at the main living room entrance. I rose and slowly made my way back into the living area to glance through the windows once more. Nothing. I was beginning to feel a bit anxious and was too apprehensive to peer through the security viewer, fearing a disturbing face might be staring back at me. I double-checked to confirm the entrance was secured and was about to leave the room when the distinct sound of knocking suddenly originated from the side entrance of the house. My heart pounded. I was unsure what to make of it. Had my guardians been locked out and were attempting to gain entry? Was someone trying to force their way in? Were there multiple individuals? I barely had time to process these thoughts when I heard the distinct sound of the doorknob from the lower level being manipulated, as if someone was attempting to open it. Our lower floor was essentially beneath the dwelling, with its entrance being quite concealed. To reach that particular access point, one had to circumnavigate the entire house, enter our backyard, and go beneath the outdoor deck. One would either need prior knowledge of that entrance's existence or be remarkably determined to find a way inside. Luna was whimpering and barking louder than ever, dashing from room to room, seemingly trying to pinpoint the perceived threat. It felt as though the entire dwelling was encircled. The noises from the lower level intensified, and it almost sounded as if whoever it was had managed to gain entry, because suddenly the noise ceased. My heart sank. I stopped breathing, standing frozen in the silence, merely awaiting the next sound. Then, with lightning speed, Luna shot down the stairs and began growling ferociously at whatever was down there. Luna was a gentle-natured black retriever who had never harmed a fly, but in that moment, I had never heard her sound more menacing. It felt like I was petrified in place for several minutes. Finally, my primal survival instinct activated when I realized Luna had stopped barking and growling. I called her back upstairs and secured the interior entrance that led to the lower level. I grabbed the landline telephone, as I didn't possess a mobile device yet, and rushed with Luna into the closet of my guardian's bedroom, where one of our firearms was kept. I sat there, armed and ready, on the verge of dialing emergency services when I suddenly heard the primary entrance open. Luna bolted out. I shouted "No" after her, but then I heard the voices of my guardians. I ran into the living room to see them stroking Luna and looking at me with a bewildered expression. I spent the next several minutes recounting the terrifying events of the night to my guardians. My mother was aghast, and my father spent the subsequent hour meticulously searching every nook and cranny of the house, both inside and out, with his firearm in hand. We didn't discover anything, and I didn't sleep a wink that night. The following afternoon, there was a knock at the primary entrance. My heart immediately skipped a beat, and I instinctively darted into another room. My father opened the door to find my Uncle Arthur standing there with an envelope in his hand. Uncle Arthur was, to put it mildly, an unsettling individual. He consistently mistreated my aunt and behaved very strangely around the children and younger relatives at family gatherings. Nothing illegal as far as we knew, but he just had this peculiar aura about him. You knew to try and keep your distance while growing up. I always felt a sense of apprehension whenever he addressed me. I can't recall anything specific he might have said, but his overall demeanor was disquieting. Even adults who spent too much time in his presence admitted he made them uncomfortable. I participated in recreational sports, and his daughter, my cousin Clara, played in a league a few years below mine. I adore my cousin and always felt sympathy for her having such an odd father, so I would often offer her advice or assist her team with pitching and fielding techniques. My mother and I discreetly listened from another room and overheard Uncle Arthur say something like, "I attempted to stop by last night to drop it off, but no one was home." I couldn't hear much else, but shortly after, I heard my father slam the door shut. My mother and I peeked out and inquired what had transpired. My father, his face trembling with anger, stated that apparently Uncle Arthur had been the one making all the commotion around the house the previous night, trying to gain entry. He handed me the envelope, and I opened it to find a card with a gift certificate inside, thanking me for assisting his daughter with her sports lessons. A night of dread and panic, all caused by my peculiar uncle. My father had issued a warning to him during their conversation at our front door, and after that, we never truly spent time with him again. When I reflect on this account now, I am at least relieved that I discovered the identity of the person behind the incident. Otherwise, I might have spent years wondering if it had been burglars, a supernatural entity, or something else entirely. I am grateful Luna was there to protect me. She most certainly deterred him when he was attempting to enter through the lower level. But even so, I am still left with so many unanswered questions. What on earth was he thinking? Why did he feel compelled to deliver that card so late at night? Why didn't he grasp the implication that we weren't home when no one answered the primary entrance? Why wouldn't he attempt to call the house to ascertain if we were present? And worst of all, what would have transpired had he managed to get inside? I've always cherished solitude. Around 5 years ago, I relocated to a modest lodge in the peaceful countryside of northern Viridia, escaping the urban clamor. The dwelling is spacious, isolated, and surrounded by expansive woodlands stretching far beyond my land. The nearest inhabitant is many kilometers away, and the only sounds audible are the breeze rustling through the foliage and the occasional bird song in the distance. It's tranquil, and that's precisely how I prefer it. Angling is my passion. I spend most of my time by the lake, situated directly behind my abode. It's the quintessential sanctuary from everything. I don't mind being by myself. In fact, I relish it. The lodge features a generous veranda that offers a view of the forest. I often sit there, a chilled beverage in hand, watching the sun descend behind the trees and listening to the nocturnal melodies of the woods. It has consistently been serene until recently. It began approximately 2 weeks ago. I was on the veranda as usual, simply gazing into the deepening twilight when I detected something, a twig snapping in the distance. I didn't give it much thought, perhaps a deer or a raccoon. The woods teem with wildlife, and I've grown accustomed to their sounds over the years. However, as the days progressed, the noises became more frequent. Initially, it was just that snapping twig or rustling leaves, things I assumed were merely animals. But then, one evening, I heard something distinct, a scratching sound. It emanated from the side of the lodge, somewhere near the spare sleeping chamber's window. It was faint, almost as if attempting to be inconspicuous. I rose from my chair, my pulse quickening slightly more than usual. I waited, but nothing further occurred. Probably just a squirrel, I rationalized to myself, but a sense of unease lingered. I decided to retreat indoors and secure the premises for the night. The following evening, I heard it again, the scratching. It wasn't confined to the side of the lodge anymore. Now it was closer. It sounded as though it was coming directly from outside the spare sleeping chamber window. I froze, listening intently, my composure beginning to fray. I couldn't explain it, but something felt amiss. I approached the window, drawing back the draperies slightly to observe what lay beyond. The moonlight illuminated the trees, casting elongated shadows across the yard. The wind was still, and everything appeared normal. No animal, no person. I shook my head, convincing myself that I was merely allowing my imagination to run wild. It was likely a branch brushing against the window, or perhaps the wind, I reasoned. There was nothing to fret about, and I retired to bed. The next night, the scratching returned. It wasn't solely scratching anymore, though. It sounded like gentle tapping, as if someone were tapping on the window, attempting to gain my attention. My heart skipped a beat, and I sprang from my bed. I seized a handheld lamp and crept through the dim corridor towards the spare sleeping chamber. When I reached the window, I directed the beam outwards. There was nothing there, no individual, no creature, just the familiar empty woods. Yet, I couldn't shake the sensation that I was not alone. I couldn't articulate it, but something was wrong. The air around me felt dense, heavy. I returned to bed, but sleep eluded me. Every minor sound seemed amplified, and every creak of the floorboards echoed as if someone were moving within the dwelling. I remained awake, listening, but eventually succumbed to sheer exhaustion. The nights continued, and the sounds persisted. I would hear them nightly, always the same. A tap, a scratch, sometimes even a faint murmur that seemed to originate from within the very walls. I attempted to disregard it, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. One night, I resolved to confront whatever was causing it. Perhaps it's just an animal, I thought. Maybe a raccoon or some other creature has found its way inside. I retrieved a pry bar from the shed outside, deeming it prudent to have something in case matters escalated. I proceeded to the spare sleeping chamber and carefully unlatched the door. The air inside felt stagnant, as if untouched for ages. I hadn't utilized the room in months. I swept the handheld lamp around the chamber, moving slowly, inspecting every corner. Beneath the sleeping cot, behind the cabinet, nothing. I stood there for a moment, feeling foolish. There was nothing. It was just the same old room, empty. But as I turned to depart, I noticed something. The wardrobe door was slightly ajar. I didn't recall leaving it that way. My stomach churned. I slowly approached and pulled open the door. Nothing was inside, but as I directed the handheld lamp into the back corner of the wardrobe, I observed something peculiar. A small piece of fabric caught on the edge of the wall. It was dark, tattered, almost like a fragment of a tire. My breath hitched in my throat. I've always considered myself a pretty rational person, not easily spooked. I'm a geology student, or I was at the time this happened, and I tend to look for logical explanations for things. But this one experience, this one still makes the hairs on my arms stand up when I think about it too much, even years later. It was during my sophomore year of college, fall break. Most students went home or on trips, but I'd picked up a house-sitting gig to make a bit of extra cash. It was for one of my professors, Dr. Albright, who taught art history. She was eccentric, to put it mildly, and her house matched her personality. It was this old two-story Victorian place, set back from a quiet road on the outskirts of town, with a thick patch of woods bordering the backyard, beautiful in a creepy, gothic sort of way, filled with antiques, strange paintings, and artifacts she'd collected from who knows where. She was going to be in Europe for 10 days, and my job was just to water the plants, collect the mail, and generally make sure the place didn't burn down or get broken into. Seemed easy enough. The first couple of days were fine, almost boring. I got used to the house's noises, the creaks of the floorboards, the sighing of the wind in the eaves. Old houses talk, that's what my grandma used to say. I'd spend my days studying, reading, enjoying the quiet. I did sometimes get that vague feeling of being watched, especially in the long upstairs hallway lined with these unsettling portraits. But I just chalked it up to being alone in an unfamiliar, imposing house. It was the third night, I think, when things started to get weird. A storm was rolling in, one of those big autumn gales that rattles the windows and makes the trees outside sound like they're scratching to get in. The power had been flickering on and off all evening, and I was curled up on the ancient velvet couch in the living room, trying to read by the light of my phone and a couple of strategically placed candles, just in case. That's when I first heard it, a faint tapping sound. At first, I figured it was just a branch hitting one of the upstairs windows, whipped around by the wind. It was irregular, kind of soft. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my book. After a while, I got up to make some tea in the kitchen. As I passed through the dim living room, something on the ornate mantelpiece caught my eye. It was a small, antique music box, inlaid with mother of pearl, one of Dr. Albright's prized possessions. I distinctly remembered noticing it earlier that day, and it had been closed. Now, the lid was just slightly ajar, maybe a millimeter, not much, but enough for me to notice. I frowned. I didn't remember going near the mantelpiece or touching anything on it. Maybe the vibrations from the storm? I reached out and gently pushed the lid closed, feeling the little click as it latched. It was probably nothing, just me being jumpy. I went to the kitchen, and just as I was waiting for the kettle to boil, the lights flickered one last time, and then darkness. A complete power outage, I sighed. Of course, I found Dr. Albright's emergency flashlight in a drawer, thankfully it worked, and lit a few more candles, placing them around the downstairs area. The house suddenly felt 10 times bigger, the shadows deeper and more menacing. The silence, apart from the howling wind outside, was absolute. And then the tapping started again. This time, it was more distinct, clearer, and it was definitely coming from upstairs. It wasn't the random scrape of a branch. It was rhythmic. Tap, 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 tap. A pause, then again. My stomach did a little flip. That wasn't the wind. That was something else. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding ridiculously small and shaky. "Is anyone there?" Silence, just the wind and the rain lashing against the house. My heart was thumping. I told myself it was the old house settling, the storm making things shift. But it sounded so intentional. Reluctantly, I decided I had to check. I mean, what if someone had gotten in? Even though I was sure I'd locked all the doors. Holding the flashlight beam ahead of me like a weapon, I slowly started up the main staircase, each creak of the steps under my feet echoing in the oppressive silence. As I reached the upstairs landing, the tapping stopped. Just cut off. I swept the flashlight beam down the long, dark hallway. Empty. I checked the guest bedroom first, then the small bathroom. Nothing. My hand was shaking a little as I pushed open the door to Dr. Albright's study. This was the room that always felt the creepiest to me, crammed with books and more strange artifacts. In the center of the room was an old wooden rocking chair. Dr. Albright had specifically told me not to sit in it, or even touch it, as it was a very old family heirloom and quite fragile. As my flashlight beam fell on it, I froze. The rocking chair was moving, just barely. A tiny, almost imperceptible sway, back and forth,